The war in Ukraine could end as early as this summer. This rhetoric has suddenly started coming from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European officials. But there's something that needs to be explained here, and we'll sort it out. At the very least, Zelensky assures that some super important events for Ukraine will take place in June and July. At the same time, Crimea ended up under blockade, Ukraine's defense forces struck Chonhar, and as you know, there's a strategic bridge there. Strikes by Ukrainian forces on the bridge near the temporarily occupied village of Chonhar in the Kherson region, located on the border with annexed Crimea, have brought a transport collapse closer for Russian military logistics on the peninsula. In addition, due to successful strikes on the road connecting temporarily occupied Mariupol with annexed Crimea, the Russian military command has banned the transportation of military cargo along the Mariupol-Berdyansk-Melitopol highway. In response to the successful operations of the unmanned systems forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the Basmany District Court of Moscow once again arrested in absentia the commander of the unmanned systems forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Robert Madyar. In general, let's quickly discuss all this news together right now. My name is Pechiy, let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this episode, and leave any comment under this video. So June and July can determine a lot for Ukraine. Such a statement was made by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, at a joint briefing with the President of Estonia, Alar Karis, in Tallinn. Here is the quote. Ukrainian positions on the front are strong. Our long-range impact on Russian logistics, Russian oil refining, and Russian military production is also strong. In temporarily occupied Crimea, and in some regions of Russia, there is already a gasoline shortage, and for months there has been no normal communication. Russia loses more than 30,000 soldiers killed and severely wounded every month. Also, Zelensky noted that Ukraine will discuss in the coming days exactly how Europe should participate in the negotiations and when the negotiations might begin. Because Europe needs a real voice in the peace negotiations. At the same time, America, according to Zelensky, is ready to get involved in these efforts. The second topic to discuss with the Europeans is strengthening air defense. And the third point, Zelensky mentioned the expectation of a decision by the European Union to open clusters for the start of negotiations on Ukraine's accession to the EU. And many Ukrainian media outlets picked up on another point. I didn't just mention that Zelensky was at the briefing not alone, but with the Estonian president for no reason. The war in Ukraine could end this summer. Well, that's the kind of news Ukrainian media are spreading right now, citing the president of Estonia who was standing next to Zelensky. But in reality, President of Estonia Karis said that in the summer there will be a window of opportunity to start peace talks. Not that the war could end. No, these are completely different things. The start of the negotiation process does not guarantee a quick end to the war. Negotiations with the Russians, such as those started by the Americans last year, have already shown us this. Nevertheless, the armed forces of Ukraine are really disrupting Russian logistics right now, as Zelensky mentioned. And here, let's go step by step. You already know that the armed forces of Ukraine are now attacking the occupiers' logistics network in southern Ukraine with drones. The so-called land corridor from Russia to occupied Crimea is under attack. And the commander of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Unmanned Systems Forces, Madyar, reported that due to successful strikes on the road connecting temporarily occupied Mariupol with Crimea, the Russian military command has banned the transportation of military cargo along the route that Russians call the Novorossiya Highway. And according to Madyar, the commander of the Russian Vostok group of forces ordered the occupiers to transport supplies using bypass routes. He noted that in 2 weeks, military cargo traffic on the so-called R280 highway has already decreased by 71%. In addition to this, Ukrainian forces are actively attacking the Chonhar bridge. According to the military, strikes on the bridge near the temporarily occupied village of Chonhar in the Kherson region, located on the border with annexed Crimea, could bring Russian military logistics on the peninsula closer to collapse. And I should note here that the Chonhar bridge is one of several logistical routes that the Russians use to deliver military cargo. But gradually, the armed forces of Ukraine are creating certain conditions for a transport collapse. And here I should remind you that earlier, the armed forces of Ukraine had already destroyed 3 railway ferries across the Kerch Strait and created problems for the occupiers there. And it's already obvious that when logistics through the mainland part of Ukraine to Crimea are completely destroyed, the armed forces of Ukraine will clearly move on to attacks on the only remaining transport artery, the Crimean Bridge. And against the backdrop of the ongoing fuel crisis in Crimea, signs of food shortages have started to appear on the peninsula. Residents of the peninsula report empty shelves in stores, panic buying, and restrictions on the sale of certain goods. Stores have already started imposing restrictions on the sale of certain products. For example, according to videos posted on social media, customers are allowed to buy no more than 3 bottles of vegetable oil and 3 packs of pasta per person. Moreover, sugar, buckwheat, rice, flour, salt, pasta, vegetable oil, and some other goods have started to disappear from store shelves in Crimea. And now it's impossible to buy gasoline unless you have a special coupon from the occupation authorities. Tourists from Russia are already canceling their trips to Crimea because there's a risk of simply not being able to leave. There's really no gasoline. And in response to all this, the Russians decided to react in their usual manner. The Basmany District Court of Moscow has decided to arrest in absentia the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Robert Madyar Brody, in connection with an alleged group terrorist attack that resulted in fatalities. Also, as part of the same case, the Russian court arrested in absentia the commander of the UAV Systems Brigade Pechiy Madyar Andrei Klimenko. It is noted that the basis for this was the attack on the college in Starobilsk on May 22, which, according to the Russian side, resulted in the deaths of 10 people. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine denied the Russian lies about the strike on a civilian dormitory and noted that in the area of the city of Starobilsk, they attacked one of the headquarters of the Rubicon unit. Well, if you missed it, let me remind you. Earlier, the Second Western District Military Court of Russia had already sentenced Commander SBS Madyar to life imprisonment in absentia. And even earlier, the previous sentence in Russia was handed down on March 20. At that time, Madyar was sentenced in absentia to 18 years in a high-security penal colony under the article on aiding terrorist activities. The charges against the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces were related to drone strikes on facilities of the Russian fuel and energy complex. Well, in short, the Russians almost every month sentence Robert Madyar Brody to life imprisonment, but he keeps hitting those Russians with drones. I'll leave it at that for now. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so financially with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone. Budemo Torzok.